Welcome and welcome back everybody, Tabletop Toki here, and in today's video I'll be going through my board game plays from August 2024. As you can see, I had 86 plays of 71 different games, and a reason why that number might seem low relative to some other months is because I played 41 new games this month that I had never before played, and other than a couple of them which were taught to me by my partner or friends, I did a majority of the learning and teaching this month. So there were a lot of new games. We're just gonna jump right into it. Pretty even Stevens on the month overall. The first game on this list is Sweetlands from Uchibukoya, and I was able to play this not just once, twice, 3, 4, but 5 times this month, which is pretty much unheard of for me, especially for a game of this length and weight. I do have a solo playthrough of Sweetlands up on the channel. It is a chunkier Euro style game where you are trying to create the most enticing land of sweets to get the cookie rabbits to move in. Since doing that solo video, there have been some updates to the rules and clarifications, so it's not a 100% accurate representation of every single specific rule, but if you want to watch it to get a better overall idea of what the game is about and how it plays, be sure to check that out. I'll also be releasing a more in-depth preview and review here shortly for the upcoming Kickstarter campaign, so stay tuned for that. I also had my first plays of The Cursed Castle from Best with One Games. Similar to Sweetlands, I will be releasing a full solo party video for The Cursed Castle. This is a solo roguelike dungeon crawler that is really snappy, so I was very excited to try it this month. The Last Penguin is a finger dexterity game. That's right, you heard me. Also like Finger Twister, which is a blast and crazy and challenging more than you would think. I also played Shy's Converge, Catalysts of Change, 2-player along with the solo expansion Visions of Aspect. I will say that with this one, I definitely prefer it solo. It makes it nice and puzzly. The 2-player seems like a back and forth. However, at least with the factions that I had in Catalysts of Change, I didn't feel like there were too many dynamic options since you only do 2 actions on your turn. The cards are multi-use, but each faction had the same discard ability on every card. It would be interesting to see if there were some balance with higher value cards, which might get you better variability for scoring, might have different discard effects or something like that, but perhaps switching them up with some of the other factions could remedy some of the issue I had there. Stack the Cactus is a dexterity game from Ridley's. This one is just super cute and fun. In fact, there wasn't even a BGG listing, so I had to make one, and I'm now seeing that we need to make sure that we upload the cover image for the game as well, so I'll be doing that right after this. Some other favorites here. I also got to preview Hive, which is a solo roll and write game with some dice worker placement. Your dice essentially represent your different bees in your hive, and you're going to assign them to different tasks, such as tending to larvae, gathering nectar, making queen's jelly, and other things. I thought it was a really enjoyable solo puzzle that really picks up and builds nicely. I do have a full Instagram review if you're curious about that one. Dungeons of the Oakdell is another print and play roll and write that I had the pleasure of playing this month. I will definitely be getting a video up on this one too, but the quick and dirty of it is that you are traveling through a dungeon, so you roll dice and draft them, which determine your speed that you move through the dungeon, but the faster you move, the more susceptible you are to taking damage from various monsters that you'll encounter. Although there's no shortage of this theme in the board game world, I will say that the mechanics and how this one plays out is very unique, so we'll be taking a closer look at that here soon. Kinfire Delve Vainglory's Grotto is another one that was a first for me. I had heard good things about this game, but I didn't know a lot about it, and upon opening it, unboxing it, looking at the cards, I was completely enamored. The mechanics themselves are not anything to necessarily write home about in terms of being innovative, but I do think that the game has a really nice flow to it, at least at 2 players. I have yet to play it solo, and I would be really interested to pick up more packs and play it with more people, because one of the cool things is when you're playing cooperatively, you play your action card to overcome a challenge or defeat an enemy, and then other players can boost by using the bottoms of their cards with matching colors. So I feel like this one could be really dynamic with 3 players. 4 might be a bit too much, but we'll see. Transcribe the Art of Alchemy is another PNP, and again, this one is up on Instagram if you want to see a more in-depth look at it. It's a roll and write, but with some engine building and programmable movement, which is something that I haven't quite seen before. Essentially, you are mapping out, trying to connect to different symbols and acquire them in order to complete your your magnum opus. It's certainly innovative in terms of its mechanics. There's nothing quite like it, at least not that I've seen in the board game space. So if that sounds interesting, this is definitely one to keep an eye on. Villagers of the Oakdell from 2 Acorn Games is another one I got to try. This is a Euro style roll and write where you are going to be selecting different dice which will gather you different resources as you defend your village, build buildings, and collect and manage resources. I would say this is kind of an intermediary game in terms of the weight of it. It has similar elements to something like Hadrian's Wall, but in a very pared down manner. So I think for people who want that feel, but in something more concise, Villagers of the Oakdell would be a great option. Moving right along, Flip Town. I finally found a copy thanks to our sponsor, Novel Knights. This is one that I've heard about over and over again from many people, friends in our Discord. I'm super glad that I finally got a copy. This is a Western themed flip and fill game, as you might imagine. Each round you draw 3 cards, one of which will be used for a poker hand that you're setting up for the round, and the others will be used for the number and suit to delineate which section of your board you can go to and the value of that action you can do. Some really cool engine building, great combos. There's definitely a lot of character here, which I love. The poker hands, I will say, did seem maybe a little bit random, but I think for the theme and the idea of that, it certainly didn't seem like an issue necessarily, even for someone who doesn't really like a lot of randomness in their games. Mountain Photographer is a trick-taking game for 3 to 5 players where you draft all of your cards at the beginning of the round. That's right. You set out groups of 3 and 2 cards. Everybody takes 2 groups of 3 and 1 group of 2 in order to form their hand. So you have perfect information about what everybody's cards are, about the trump suit, about the leftover cards turning into prizes that you can get by playing pickaxes. I believe the original theming of this was Reapers, and then this is the Japanese retheming of it. I had heard some good things about this one, but had never really had an opportunity to purchase it until I did an order from Amazon. The full unboxing, if you want to see it and take a look at all the cards and first impressions with me, is up on the channel. But this is one that I have been dying to play again and get back to the table, so hopefully I'll be able to do that this month. Dragons of Etchin is an in-hand card game from Joel Klipthal, who is also the designer of Birdscaping, which I talked about on my solo games list from last year. Again, this is kind of a gold standard in terms of solo games, micro games, 18 card games, Game Crafter published games. I just had never had the opportunity to get my hands on a copy or be able to play it until this past month. It definitely lived up to all of my expectations, and I am so very excited to see that there is a campaign for a new published edition with all of the expansions that are out currently, I believe. I don't own those yet, so that's good for me. I just have to be a little patient, but this is an absolute delight of a game. And if you haven't played it yet, definitely be on the lookout for a copy. qess is a quick word puzzle solo game where you have a bunch of dice that you're rolling to make a crossword as fast as you can. Each puzzle provides a unique combination. I really love word games, and so this is the perfect little kind of daily puzzle for me. It's 5 p.m. is a Japanese game about time management, balancing how much money and time you spend at work during the day with the enjoyment of getting to spend your money and use that time in the evening. I've been on the fence about purchasing this one for a while because while I do love the aesthetic and the idea of it, the mechanics looked kind of so-so. Unfortunately, upon playing it, I do think that at least multiplayer, it wasn't very rewarding. There weren't a lot of great strategic options. It mostly just felt like the game was playing itself. For solo, I've heard that it gets a little puzzlier, but I don't necessarily think that there's enough here for me to warrant keeping it in my collection, even if that is the case. Tatu is a trick-taking game. This is one that I chanced on at the last moment when doing my order from Japan because the cards are gorgeous, it's trick-taking, and there's a twist. You can actually request that other players play a card for you on your turn. So you have a personal suit, or in a 3 or 4 player game, you and your team have a personal suit. And if you don't want to play one of your suited cards from hand, you can point to someone and say, hey, I want you to play one of my cards for me from your hand. They get randomly distributed at the beginning. I don't know that I would like it at 3 and 4, but at 2 players, oh my gosh, I am in love with this, and I'm so excited again to be able to play it more, because you have your row of 7 cards face down and then 7 cards face up on top, and that's your hand. So you get to see your opponent's hand and your hand when requesting if you want them to play a card for you or if you want to play one of your cards. It gives me the feel of what a lot of solo adaptations do for games that have elements of reading your opponents, where it takes out the uncertainty of what will they play, what card will they flip, and instead gives you all the information so you can puzzle together to the best of your ability what could happen. Such a brilliant game, and again, for 2 players, there's nothing quite like it. Tierra Knot is a fairly new release from Grand Gamers Guild. This was one of the games that was taught to me. It is a drafting and tableau building game about going out on adventures and then coming back to tell your stories. I didn't know what to expect because this was not a game that was on my radar prior to it being shared with me, and I am so excited to get my own copy one of these days, because you can teach the game in like 2 minutes, but there's variable scoring for each of the rows of cards that you set in your tableau. The different setups for how cards are laid out and how you can claim them changes based on player count. There's a solo mode, just like a little 1-pager that looks really exciting that I want to try. And the art and presentation and theme are just gorgeous. Of all the things, I didn't realize until we played it that the entire game is centered around Celtic mythology and music, which is like, I have a tattoo of that. So clearly it's a theme that really resonates with me. I'm just so excited to see. I think there's currently a Kickstarter campaign up with some new expansion content. I literally just got to try this one just a couple days ago, so I need to delve in and really look and see what all is there, because I am ecstatic about the possibility. Pocket Farm is a 1 to 4 player drafting and pattern building game where you are collecting different fruits into your baskets. This comes from designer Eric Hong, who is kind of new and up and coming. You may recognize their name because they created Veil of Eternity. I really love Pocket Farm. Again, it's a game that you can explain in like 1 minute or less, but there's some really cool options with drafting your cards and placing them, because in order to place cards, you have to fulfill their cost, which is printed in the center of the card, and you do that by covering up weather symbols of suns and clouds, which gain or decrease in value as they're placed next to other weather symbols as you grow your board. It's a really cool game with a lot of depth for how simple the rules are and how quick of a play it is, and I'm really looking forward to trying it solo and hopefully making a video. Reviving Kathmandu from Lemery Games is another one that I wasn't quite aware of until I backed their Asia Games collection. This game has some unique bidding where you have poker chips from 1 to 5 and you place them around the edges of the board, staking claim on the 2 cards in that column or row. Then you flip them and whoever has the highest will get those cards. With those cards, you're going to be constructing different buildings, trying to fulfill certain colors objectives of if you want the roof one color to match the base or a building of the full same color. Again, really quick, really snappy, easy to teach, plays up to 6, gorgeous components, and relatively affordable for how nice the production is. Jipin No was a game that was taught to me. This is a trick-taking game where you are trying to not take jalapenos, because if you do, then all the cards of that suit that you've won will become negative points. I'm not sure that I like this one, if I'm being honest. It did feel very random, and it was one of those games where it felt like everything you did throughout the round didn't matter until the very end, because you can get as many cards as you want and avoid jalapenos for the whole round, but if in that last trick or last couple of hands you get jalapenos, you're screwed. And if you have them earlier on, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because once those jalapenos are in front of you, from what I understand, you can actually play them into a trick. I'm not sure I quite got it. Maybe we played it wrong. Maybe it's just not great, but that's that. One Card Dungeon is a solo game that's played on, yes, 1 card. You use dice to check your hero and different monsters, and as it flips, it shows you at the bottom of the card what the health values, ranges, attacks, speed of each monster are. Super innovative in its design. I think that it gets a little bit repetitive as you go through. There are 12 different levels that you can play by like flipping and rotating the card, and the monsters get progressively harder or more monsters come out each round. I really really like the concept of this game. I really like doing like maybe 1 or 2 back to back, but I don't know that I want to sit there for up to, as you can see on the time, 60 minutes to play through it, if that makes sense. So I'll have to see if I can find a balance. Maybe I'll do it in sections and do like 3 scenarios one day and then come back to it with another 3. I'm not entirely sure. Between scenarios, you can also level up. So I guess I could take a quick picture in between, but that part of things, even though it's relatively low maintenance for this game, the scope of the game is also relatively small. I definitely want to come back to this one and appreciate the design, but that is a consideration. Natsu Treasures is the Japanese reskin of Rainer Kinzia's Circus Flocati. I had never gotten to play it before. It was on my wish list, and then I saw this version, which has absolutely gorgeous art and is so endearing in its theme. I think when I unboxed it on stream, I started getting a little teary-eyed, like looking through the cards. It's not a particularly crazy set collection game, but I just think that this particular packaging just makes it feel so special. I'm not sure that I would have had the same feel or enjoyed the game quite as much if it was the circus theme, if I'm being honest. Ham Sandwich Shop, adorable game about being a hamster who's making sandwiches. As you're placing the ingredients, you can also put your hamster on these sandwiches that you're making communally. Your hamster could have a secret ingredient, like a Nami hamster, which is eating the ingredient under it. So it's a little bit of bluffing where you're trying to set it up to have the perfect order based on where the hamster is in the circle and the ingredients behind it, and the sandwich in the center, which has those ingredients. It's kind of like patchwork where you have everything laid out and then you move it around too, and then you take one of those and put it on a sandwich. So yeah, I explained that a little backwards, but oh my gosh, freaking adorable. And I didn't think it would be that amazing of a game, but it was surprisingly satisfying in terms of strategy. There's definitely some randomness and there's definitely some fun with bluffing, but woo, what a treat. Point City is the kind of sequel to Point Salad. This one is a little bit more in-depth. People have equated it to Point City with Splendor because you get different buildings that allow you to do different things and get different scorings and get permanent symbols towards producing other buildings. This one was fine. I'm interested to try the solo mode. It's not necessarily one that I am dying to play again like some of these other games, but it was overall fairly solid. Jekyll and Hyde Scotland Yard is the sequel to Jekyll vs. Hyde, the competitive trick-taking game for 2. In Jekyll and Hyde, as the name might suggest, you are working together to defeat Scotland Yard. Cooperative 2-player trick-taking games are really taking off, I feel. I think Fox and the Forest Duet still stands in my mind as the gold standard favorite, but Jekyll and Hyde really did some fun things. You want to make sure to win certain tricks without giving them to Scotland Yard as they like chase you down the track, but winning tricks with the highest cards of value 8 is really good because then you get to move extra. However, when you're drafting, you have to give all your 8s to Scotland Yard's pile. It creates a little bit of craziness there in terms of your ability to manipulate those situations so that you can potentially win some 8s without Scotland Yard progressing too far. Super cool, has a lot of elements from Jekyll vs. Hyde, but puts it in a cooperative mode, and I'm excited to try some of the other campaign parts. Meow Men's, or Meow Men, is another one that didn't have a listing. It is a hidden role cooperative game where you are a bunch of cats that got stranded in the Antarctic. You're trying to repair your communications device and your snowmobile by playing cards from low to high for one set and high to low for the other set. But there could be 1 or more assassins in the group which are trying to sabotage your efforts. There are no English translated rules that I can find. We did our best. It was a little confusing because of that, but the game kind of came together pretty nicely once we had a hang of what we were doing. I would love to see an actual translation to verify if we were playing it correctly, so I'll need to post on BGG for some clarification to see if we can get that. Although, being that the game was never listed on BGG, I don't know that there's anybody looking at BGG that could answer those questions. I don't know, maybe some board game friends who speak Japanese could take a look at the rules for us and clear that up, because this was one that was really cute and fun and endearing, and I really want to try it again. Speaking of which, Super Susaru Soup was a random one I tossed in my cart because it was a couple dollars to add in my Japan order. Here you're collecting a hand of ingredients until you're ready to set up shop, and then you determine the popularity of one of the given ingredients for that round, meaning you can only have so many of that card in your hand, and that's for all players. Weirdly, this felt like a micro version of Capital Lux, which is one of my my favorite games. It's still difficult for me to wrap my mind around, but it is so interesting and so concise, like 15 to 20 minutes, boom, and then you're done. So again, this is another one that I'm itching to get back to the table. Hopefully I can do that sooner rather than later this month. The Walking Dead Surrounded from Button Shy is a relatively newer one that I got to try as well. This is a cooperative tile laying game. I think this would play best solo. I really can't ever see playing it with 3 or 4 because it's all open information, so you're just planning it together. I could see playing it with somebody you play with regularly at 2. It wasn't necessarily my favorite. I don't think that the puzzles were as rewarding as maybe some other solo games, especially from Button Shy, that play in a similar manner. Not to say that it's a bad game. I think it was perfectly fine. It just didn't reach the ridiculously high standard that Button Shy has set for a lot of its cooperative and solo games. And we're almost there. Dark Tomb is another cooperative game. I'll be honest, did not like this one. It was very fiddly. The aesthetic was kind of off, even though I love dark high fantasy, and it felt just very random and back and forth where you're traveling through fighting monsters. And unfortunately, it did just kind of feel like a slog. I would have really loved to see one little new thing that gave it some innovation other than condensing it down into a small tin. Mechanically, there just wasn't a lot there, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of strategic choices. Count of the Nine Estates is the Button Shy version of the original Court of Nine Estates, which I had done a PNP of long ago when I first got into PNPs. I think this Button Shy version really expands on it, lays it out really nicely with the full 18 cards, and is a very cool Euro style solo game, which we don't get to see very often. Maybe like, at least from Button Shy, this and Ancient Realm have that similar kind of feel. So it was very refreshing to see a different kind of game packaged in a solo microgame experience. Tricks and Snipers is from Mob Plus, who also published Nana. This is a trick-taking game, but you are only trying to win the super special 13 trick. You're trying to win using cards that match the lead card that adds to 13 or the special 7. So it's really interesting because you don't necessarily get points for every trick, just those special tricks, and then once you've gotten 2 points, you win the game. It's a very interesting take on trick-taking that I haven't seen before. Bandbooks is an older Button Shy title for solo. I hadn't gotten to try it yet. It's just a quick puzzle. I think it definitely shows a little bit of its age. We're really just kind of going through managing the different actions and using dice for various values based on the slot that they're in. So I don't necessarily know that this will be one that I'm coming back to, especially with all the other options. Varies from all play. It's a quick game where you're showing hands of if you think the card's gonna be higher, lower, same, if you think it's gonna be a fairy, whatever. It was just a quick fun one. I don't know that I need a copy, but there it is. Moose Code is a listening speed game where you are a cow who's lost their voice trying to get ingredients for a cake. So you have to tap using your spoon. Morse code, Moose Code. Surprisingly more fun than I thought, and we got very into it. It's just a really cool novelty game to have to whip out. Tranquility is a card laying game where you're trying to play from low to high. It's cooperative or solo. Honestly, didn't really care for it. I would definitely rather play something like Okie Dokie. Cat Poker, you are picking up and shedding cards, trying to get a certain combination of letters into your hand in order to win. And similar to Tricks and Sniper, you're trying to get 2 winning hands in order to win overall. All Is Bomb is a solo to 2 player, 18 card game with a lot of little expansions. So basically the theme of this is everything is a bomb and you're trying to realize the prophecy of what the princess eats for breakfast while they're all lit, but before they explode. Really fun theme, creates a lot of tension, very quick, very silly, but it has some cool strategic options as well. Coyote is similar to Durian from Oink, if you're familiar with that, but this is an older title, so I'm sure Durian was inspired by it. But essentially everybody has a coyote card that they put on their head, which has a number of coyotes. And each round you bid on how many coyotes you think there may be until you call someone out in their bluff and say, you know what, I don't think we have 35 coyotes. Everybody reveals their cards and you see how it resolves. There are a couple of special cards which change things up a little bit. Just a fun party game, and definitely looking forward to trying it with a larger group, especially because the Japanese edition plays up to, I believe, 10 players, where some other editions only play up to 6. Time Bomb is another hidden role game where you're trying to defuse a bomb by snipping certain wires of cards, making sure that you get some safety ones versus the bomb exploding. I haven't gotten to try it with a very large group, and the Japanese version does support more than 6 players, so I'm curious to see how that plays out. And last but not least, we have Rabbit Detective Usan, which I wish y'all could see the art here. Check out the unboxing. This is a really cute deduction game where one person plays as a lost bunny and the other rabbit detectives have to find their friend based on clues. There's really not too much there. You just have to choose clues of 3 categories, like I think my friend was gray and I think they were fluffy and the word I would use to describe them is effervescent or like whatever, just like abstract word for that last one. And then looking at all the little rabbits doing their things, you have to try to find the friend and get it back to them. There's also cooperative mode, which was really cute. Again, I think this is more of a collector's item and just something that really puts a smile on my face that I haven't quite seen before, with little elements of deduction versus like a really heavy strategic game. But overall, really great but exhausting month of games. Let me know in the comments down below what games you've been playing or what you're looking forward to playing this month in September. That's about all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!